It was December 1872. In the vast, lonely expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the British ship Dei Gratia was cutting through the waves on its way to Genoa. The sea was calm, the sky was clear, and everything seemed perfectly ordinary. But then, the lookout spotted something on the horizon. A ship, drifting aimlessly, its sails tattered and flapping uselessly in the wind. It was moving like a phantom, guided only by the currents. The captain of the Dei Gratia, David Morehouse, ordered his crew to hail the vessel. They shouted, but only the sound of the wind and waves answered back. Silence. As they drew closer, a sense of unease began to settle over the crew. The name on the ship's hull became visible. Mary Celeste. Captain Morehouse felt a chill run down his spine. He knew this ship. In fact, he'd had dinner with its captain, Benjamin Briggs, just before they both set sail from New York. The Mary Celeste had left port 8 days before his own ship. By all accounts, it should have already reached its destination in Italy, or at the very least be far, far ahead of them. Yet here it was, adrift and eerily quiet in the middle of the ocean. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. A boarding party was assembled. As they rowed over, the silence from the Mary Celeste was deafening. It was a ship completely devoid of life. When they climbed aboard, the scene they found only deepened the mystery. There was no one there. Not a single soul. Not Captain Briggs, not his wife Sarah, not their 2-year-old daughter Sophia, and not a single one of the 7 experienced crewmen. They had vanished. The boarding party cautiously explored the deck. The ship was wet, with over 3 feet of water sloshing in the hold, but it was still perfectly seaworthy. There were no signs of a struggle, no bloodstains, no evidence of a fight. It was as if the crew had simply evaporated into thin air. They went below deck. The ship's valuable cargo of 1,701 barrels of raw industrial alcohol was almost entirely untouched. Only 9 barrels were found empty. If pirates had attacked, why would they leave behind such a valuable prize? The mystery intensified as they entered the crew's quarters. Everything was strangely in order. Clothes were neatly folded in chests. Personal belongings, razors, pipes, and money were left behind. In the captain's cabin, they found a sewing machine with a small piece of clothing still under the needle, as if Sarah Briggs had just stepped away for a moment. A child's toy lay on a bunk. On a table in the galley, a meal sat half-eaten, as if the crew had been interrupted mid-bite and had to leave in a hurry. The food was still warm, but some things were missing. The ship's single lifeboat was gone. The captain's navigational instruments, including his chronometer and sextant, were also absent. And then there was the ship's logbook. The final entry was dated November 25th, 10 days before the ship was discovered. It recorded the ship's position as being near the Azores Islands, hundreds of miles away from where it was found. The entry ended abruptly, with no mention of any trouble or distress. It was as if the person writing had simply put down their pen and walked away, never to return. The crew of the Dei Gratia was baffled. What could have possibly happened? What could make an experienced captain, his family, and his entire crew abandon a perfectly sound ship in the middle of the vast Atlantic? They decided to sail the ghost ship to Gibraltar, hoping to claim a salvage reward and find some answers. But when they arrived, instead of answers, they found only suspicion. The Attorney General in charge of the inquiry, Frederick Solly Flood, was convinced that foul play was involved. He suspected the crew of the Dei Gratia had murdered everyone on the Mary Celeste to claim the salvage money. He subjected Captain Morehouse and his men to a grueling investigation. He had the ship torn apart, searching for any evidence of a crime. He even had a sword found on board tested for blood, but the stains turned out to be rust. Despite his intense efforts, he could find no proof of foul play. The court eventually awarded the Dei Gratia crew a salvage payment, but it was far less than expected. A clear sign that suspicion still lingered over them. The official inquiry closed, but the mystery of the Mary Celeste had only just begun. In the years that followed, the story captured the public imagination. Theories exploded, each more wild than the last. Some people whispered of a giant squid or a monstrous sea serpent rising from the depths to snatch the crew from the deck. Others pointed to pirates, suggesting a brutal but clean attack where no evidence was left behind. But again, why leave the valuable cargo? The idea of a mutiny was also floated. Perhaps the crew, fueled by the alcohol in the cargo hold, rose up against Captain Briggs. But Briggs was known as a fair and respected captain, and his crew was handpicked and experienced. There was no reason to suspect a mutiny. Then came the supernatural explanations. The story became entangled with the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, even though the ship was found nowhere near it. People spoke of alien abductions, of a portal to another dimension opening up on the deck. The ship became a true ghost ship, a symbol of the terrifying and unknown secrets of the deep ocean. One of the most famous fictional accounts, written by a young Arthur Conan Doyle before he created Sherlock Holmes, added to the mythos by inventing a story of a mutiny and a crazed ex-slave taking over the ship. The fiction was so popular that many people mistook it for fact, further blurring the lines between what was real and what was imagined. For over a century, the mystery remained unsolved, a perfect puzzle with no logical solution. But in more recent years, modern science has offered a new, more plausible theory. The answer might lie in the ship's cargo, those barrels of industrial alcohol. The 9 empty barrels were made of American red oak, which is known to be more porous than the white oak used for the other barrels. It's possible that over the course of the journey, alcohol vapors began to leak from these barrels, slowly building up in the confined space of the cargo hold. This leads to the explosion theory. Scientists have suggested that some kind of spark, perhaps from 2 metal bands on the barrels, rubbing together, could have ignited the alcohol fumes, causing a dramatic but contained pressure wave explosion. It would have been more of a powerful whoosh than a destructive blast. Such an event would have been terrifying. It would have blown the main hatch cover off, creating a loud, frightening noise, but it wouldn't have left any scorch marks or soot, explaining the lack of fire damage. Imagine the scene. Captain Briggs, hearing the sudden violent burst from the hold, would have feared the entire ship was about to go up in flames. With his wife and young daughter on board, his first and only priority would have been to get them to safety. Panicked, he might have ordered everyone to abandon ship immediately. They would have scrambled into the lifeboat, taking only the most essential navigation tools, believing they would wait at a safe distance for the ship to explode. He likely would have tied the lifeboat to the Mary Celeste with a tow line, planning to reboard once the danger had passed. But here fate may have dealt its final, cruel blow. A sudden storm could have snapped the tow line, or perhaps the wind simply picked up, pushing the larger, faster Mary Celeste away from the tiny, vulnerable lifeboat. Adrift in the vastness of the Atlantic, with no ship in sight, their chances of survival would have been almost zero. They would have been lost to the sea while their ship, empty and undamaged, sailed on. This theory neatly explains many of the puzzling details: the missing lifeboat, the abandoned meal, the lack of struggle, and the seaworthy condition of the ship. It paints a picture not of monsters or pirates, but of a tragic miscalculation made in a moment of panic by a captain trying to protect his family. And so the Mary Celeste sailed on alone, a silent testament to the crew that was no longer there. She was eventually found, salvaged, and put back into service, but she seemed to carry a curse. She changed hands 17 times over the next decade, bringing misfortune and financial ruin to her owners. Her final captain, in an attempt to commit insurance fraud, deliberately ran her aground on a reef in Haiti. But even then, the ship refused to cooperate, failing to sink as planned. She was left to rot on the reef, a final lonely resting place for the most famous ghost ship in history. Even today, while the explosion theory is the most widely accepted, it remains just that, a theory. There is no definitive proof. The ultimate fate of Captain Briggs, his family and his crew remains one of the greatest unsolved maritime mysteries of all time. It's a haunting reminder that even in our modern world, the ocean still holds secrets that it may never give up. The story of the Mary Celeste endures, a ghost ship sailing forever through the pages of history, her decks empty, her destination unknown. Thank you so much for watching. What do you think happened to the crew? Let me know your theories in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into history's mysteries, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. We'll see you in the next one.